Think you could survive a night in this diner? This is Donut Panic, a psychological horror game about donuts, hallucinations, and a chef slowly losing his mind. And it's the most fun I've ever had making games. But a year ago, this wasn't a horror game at all, which means somewhere along the way, something went very wrong. After releasing my last game, I started prototyping a few new ideas. From dog sledding adventures to tornado destruction, I tried a whole bunch of weird stuff, but by far the best prototype came from this. See, I always enjoy putting elements of my real life into my games, and my wife happens to be a fantastic baker, so I had her put me to work for a day to see if it would spark any ideas. By the way, her bakery wound up being extremely useful, but more on that later. Anyways, my one-day baking career culminated in this, a cozy little cooking game where customers order donuts, you learn their stories, and I'm so bored! After releasing Farewell North, I kind of felt like I needed to make another wholesome game to try and build on that success. But I knew I would never actually play this game, so it just felt like I was making it for someone else. I realized I was really craving doing something entirely different. Good as this prototype felt, it just didn't feel like me. So I added it to the graveyard of never-made games, and moved on. I kept prototyping until I accidentally stumbled into the solution in the form of a dark comedy about the safety inspector of a doomed 1800s icebreaker. You'd come across sailors dealing with faulty equipment, and you'd have to work out how to save them. But you only had one shot at each puzzle, one mistake, and I added a few areas to explore the concept, including a kitchen, which is when I remembered the donut prototype. Ah, that's perfect. A quick copy-paste, and voila, we have donut making again. Thing is, it felt good. Like, so good. Like, it was the best part of the game. And eventually the icebreaker dissolved away and that creepy little kitchen stayed, and I did the only rational thing. I started making a psychological horror game about donuts. But I had one big problem. I don't actually know how to make a horror game. So, over the next year, I've studied every horror book, movie, game, and show I could get my hands on, and I quickly learned a few things. First, the best horror is still scary with the lights on. It doesn't just rely on being dark. Looking back on this old footage, I was so naive. And second, horror lives and dies by its sound design. Now, John crushed it with the Farewell North soundtrack. I knew I needed to get him on board again, but this idea was pretty different. Tastefully, eh? Look, I know a horror game about donuts sounds ridiculous, so I wasn't sure that would qualify as tasteful. But I had a vision. I threw together a little concept trailer with janky visuals and entirely stolen music, but it did the job. John was on board, but can he do horror? Oh god, that is terrifying. Yeah, he can do horror. We're getting a little ahead of ourselves though. I mean, you don't even know whose voice that is. For now, with the sound design locked in, it's on to the next challenge. At this point, I basically had the concept of a diner with a panic room attached to it, really just because I liked the name Donut Panic, but how does that actually work as a game? Around this time, I was quite hooked on anomaly games until, well, suddenly I wasn't. There was a flood of these games, and the niche was dying quick as it was born, but I still felt that there was room to explore the mechanic in new ways. I particularly liked how games like Dollmare and Mortuary Assistant used anomalies to support wider mechanics and deeper narratives, and I had a few ideas to take this further in Donut Panic. So I prototyped anomalies and suddenly became something very interesting. You're running a donut shop while slowly losing your grip on reality. You either serve the customer or you run to your panic room if you suspect that you're hallucinating. Get it wrong and, well. There was this interesting contrast with your attention pulled between cooking and studying your environment, but would players actually like it? After a few playtests, I really knew I was onto something. But I'm a narrative guy and I just can't help myself. So I outlined a story that needed multiple endings and several nights, with each night followed by an excursion to break up the game loop. This whole narrative business was pretty major scope creep though. So with this prototype in hand, I went in search of funding. Somehow I convinced the fine folks at the UK Games Fund to give me some dough, which meant this ridiculous donut horror game suddenly became very real. The first hire was Kate Ashwin to illustrate a mascot character and in-game posters to help teach the mechanics. I gave her 1950s, 60s cinema posters and ads for reference, and she came up with some awesome designs. After voicing a character in Farewell North, I knew Paul Warren was the voice I wanted for our main character. I sent him a short test monologue and...
That's the price of perfection, attention, sacrifice.
Oh yeah, that's definitely our Hamish. And with our main character cast, I wrote and landed on a deep story about obsession, ego, and addiction, and these silly donuts and customers came to represent so much more. But this time I wasn't so sure I was actually qualified to do it alone. I needed an expert. Enter the psychotherapist. My cousin happens to specialize in these themes I was writing to, and after sending her my notes, she was actually able to explain the behavioral traits and hallucinations I had written with a real disorder, diagnosing our character. Now, I cannot even begin to explain how helpful this was. Everything suddenly clicked into place. So much so that I asked her to write psychological assessments from the perspective of an in-game therapist, which players can find in-game. It's really turning into a family production. Speaking of dragging my family into things, one of the scenes I wrote was intended for live action, but it would need to be filmed in a bakery. Thankfully, my wife has one of those, and I even roped her into performing one of the roles. Trouble is, the bakery only closes a couple days per year, so we only had 2 chances to film what we needed, or the idea would have to be scrapped. We practiced for weeks in the living room, testing costumes and editing the footage to see what would work. When the day finally came, we hauled all the gear over to the bakery on Boxing Day, and we whiffed it. Sadly, we had to eat our props and regroup. With just one more shot, we changed the direction, reworked some things, hauled the gear back over, and it turned out so well. I definitely want to film more live action in the future, but honestly, it was Chloe that stole the show. And after a year of prototypes, rewrites, and donut-induced hallucinations, I think we're finally ready to announce this thing. The last few weeks, John and I have been putting together a weird and wild trailer which hopefully conveys the gameplay, the tone, and the depth of this game. My concept was basically the dance scene from Pulp Fiction, but horror. Time will tell if that turned out great or went completely off the rails, but I hope you go check it out. It's on the channel right now, and wishlist Donut Panic on Steam if it sounds like your cup of tea. There's still a lot of work left to do, but we will be starting wider playtesting soon, so be sure to join the Discord if you want to join in. Otherwise, I will see you guys in the next devlog. Thank you so much to all my patrons, and a special thanks to my ospreys, Elogon, Jason Hansen, Ellie Swaley, Justice Lind, Brandon Pung, Peter James, Will Todd, Neil Blakey Milner, Peter Randall, Jason Lynn, Alan Halstead, and Josh Temple. I will see you guys next time.